The housing market is not going to crash. Here's why. In the last few years, the cost of housing has exploded. The median home price in Washington went from $362,000 to $647,000 in 5 years. So it nearly doubled. And a lot of people are waiting for the housing market to crash.
But after doing a lot of research and seeing what's really going on, I don't think that the housing market is going to crash. Now, don't get me wrong. I do want house prices to go down. I think what's going on is completely unsustainable. And there are some underlying reasons that I don't really see people talking about online. So let's get into it. Number one, a huge trend has happened where everyone wants to be a landlord now. The American dream is no longer to own a house with a white picket fence. It's to own a portfolio of 10 homes that will pay for your white house with a picket fence.
So much more content teaching people how to get into real estate investing. And more people I talk to see it as their ticket to passive income. Couldn't find any actual stats on this, but I have a very strong feeling that being a landlord was not this mainstream thing that it is today. Back in the day, information in general spread a lot slower, so unless you stumbled upon a book about real estate investing or came from a circle of people that knew about it, it probably wouldn't have even crossed your mind. This book right here inspired a generation of landlords. If you haven't read it, spoiler alert, it's basically about how to buy properties and rent them out. But this book didn't come out until 1997. Where then it actually sold 40 million copies, which tells me it was probably pretty groundbreaking for that time.
And now with the internet, you can't go on YouTube or TikTok without learning about how to be a landlord. It really is everywhere. And this aspiration has created more demand but less supply because a lot of these people, which we'll get into later, that are really into real estate investing, hold forever. They don't really end up selling, very often at least. And so the more people that are in this movement of wanting to own a portfolio of homes, the less supply there's going to be out there. They're not building new ones. They're just buying ones that are already on the market.
Of the 140 million homes in the US, 20 million of them are owned by landlords. That's 14% of all the homes. Not to mention institutional investors entering into the picture. Although they don't own as many houses as you would think, apparently they only own 300,000 of the 15 million single family homes. I thought it was a lot more. That's only like 2% of all the houses. Still, I don't think they should own any, but it's not as much as I once thought. However, CNBC thinks by 2030, institutional investors could own 7.6 million of the single family homes. If this trend continues, it will just make it harder for the average person to buy. So while the idea of owning a rental property is not new, I do think it has just gotten even more popular as time has gone on, which has increased the demand and lowered the supply. Maybe this is just the circle that I run in, but I swear everyone I talk to wants to invest in real estate just so they can rent it out.
This next reason, I think it's the biggest one, and it is zoning. When it comes down to it, low supply and high demand is the main reason housing is unaffordable. We haven't been building as many houses as we did back in the 80s or the 70s. So why then don't we just build more? Well, it's easier said than done because of zoning, NIMBYs, cost of construction. If you take a look at this map here, you'll see that almost all of Seattle is zoned only for single family houses. There are some pockets of orange, and that's where people have built townhouses. I mean, the vast majority of it, you can't build anything other than a single family house.
NIMBY stands for not in my backyard, and it's basically people who block new houses from being developed. Basically, people don't want to end up like this. The last single family house left by a bunch of townhouses. I mean, it kind of would suck if all of your neighbors sold their houses and then there were just a bunch of townhouses next to yours. But I also think a lot of them are thinking about the value of their house. If there's more supply, their house isn't worth as much. And I think a lot of people have seen their home values go up so much, they're banking on that maybe for their retirement. And so they are not going to let those home prices go down.
Because what happens when someone goes to rezone an area in a city is that the people in the neighborhood can potentially block that from happening. These people can show up to the meetings and delay the build or sometimes completely block it from happening. This lady actually has successfully blocked a condo building from being built for 18 years because she doesn't want her beloved view of this hill of dead grass. Like, I'm sorry, but it's not like that good of a view. She doesn't want this view to be gone, and so she showed up to all the meetings to make sure that it gets blocked.
The developer, Phil, proposed that they build 20 condos here that would house about 45 people. The neighbors all got together and made signs, showed up to meetings, and to this day have still successfully blocked this development from being built.
So while we desperately need more housing, there are people that are actively working to block that from happening because they know it will lower the value of their homes. I don't really know the solution, but what I do know is this is a good reason the housing market probably won't crash, because this is a really difficult thing to change. The next thing is the lock-in rate effect. This is a phenomenon that's happening that is making it so nobody wants to sell. And that is because most people locked in a very low interest rate. During COVID, rates were as low as 2 or 3%. We've never seen interest rates that low in 20 or 30 years. That means the cost to borrow is so much less. Let's take, for example, this house for sale just at $1 million. At a 3% interest rate, it would be $5,100 per month, but at a 7.5% interest rate, it would be $7,273 per month. Pretty significant difference. So what we're finding is all of these people who have locked in these low rates don't want to sell their houses because they're gonna have to go and house hunt for a home at a 7.5% interest rate. This New York Times article found that this lady had a rental property and could sell it to help buy her new house, but didn't see the point because the interest rate was so low. A lot of people have this mentality. I've even had it with my Palm Springs house. I'm like, why would I sell it when the interest rate is so low? Everyone that locked in those low rates, look at the TikTok comments. These people never want to sell. They want to die in that house.
The next reason is that lenders are more strict than they were in 2008. Anyone who is expecting a 2008-like crash should know that the circumstances are very different from 2008. So back before 2008, not only was it way easier to get a loan, but there were also a lot of adjustable rate mortgages, which we don't really see anymore. A lot of people have locked in low interest rate loans that they can afford, and they have proven that they very much can afford. I know this firsthand from buying the Palm Springs house. It was not easy to get that loan. We had to send in so much documentation and prove that we could more than afford it. Also, boomers own a huge share of real estate. The New York Times found boomers own 44% of all real estate in the US. And those loans are pretty old. A lot of them probably just own the house outright at this point. They're most likely not going to foreclose. So even if there was a crash or things went dramatically down, they wouldn't have to sell.
This next one I never really hear people talking about on the internet, but I know it's happening in real life, and that is down payment gifts from parents. A lot of times when I look around at the housing market, I'm like, who the hell could ever afford this? Like, no person with a normal job could afford this. If you're a teacher, you cannot afford a house in the Seattle area. This is the tea that no one's telling you. It's that a lot of people are getting down payment gifts from their parents.
There's a couple studies I found that show about 30 to 40% of Americans that have purchased a home have gotten help in some way financially to do so.
These people aren't going and shouting this from the rooftops. Most people keep it pretty quiet. I had no idea this was happening at all because my parents would absolutely never do this, so I just assumed no one's parents did this. I have a lot of friends who are real estate agents, and so they know where the money comes from. The only way for a lot of people with normal jobs or even really good jobs to afford a house in some of the nicer areas or larger cities is if they're getting a gift from someone. And that's one of the reasons that despite the prices being this high, some people are able to afford.
And really the last reason I don't think anything is going to change is there aren't any tax incentives to build. So if there's one thing I've noticed about real estate investors, it is that they go where the tax loopholes are. So if we want more people to build, shouldn't we incentivize them to do so? Currently, there are a lot of tax incentives to buying and holding for a really long time, but not really that much for building. You can get a tax credit of up to $5,000 if you make it energy efficient, but that's it. If you go and buy an existing home, you can write off the real estate taxes, a lot of the interest, and a small percentage of the house each year as depreciation. I believe it's around 3%. There are people out there who buy enough real estate to offset the income from their day job, and they don't really have to pay any taxes. Legally, it's legal. You can see how there is this incentive if people don't want to pay as much in taxes to go and put their money in real estate. I think unless we see a big incentive to build, I don't really see that changing. Like, for example, if they enacted something where if you build a new construction house and sell it, you don't have to pay taxes on the first $250,000 that you make on it. I think if we enacted something like that for like 5 years, we'd see a lot more houses. But I'm not an expert, that's just an idea that I had. The point is, I don't think we're gonna see a housing market crash unless we see some huge change in the tax structure as well, because a lot of people put money into real estate for the reason of not having to pay as much in taxes legally. So those are some of the reasons I don't think the housing market is going to crash that I don't hear people talking about as much. I actually think when interest rates eventually go down, home prices are just gonna go up even more. But I'm not an expert and this is not financial advice. This is just my own gut feeling on it from the research that I've done. I don't like what I see going on, but also I wanna face the reality of it. I know a lot of people want there to be a housing crash, but I think what we're actually seeing is just a cycle being perpetuated that makes it more unaffordable for the next generation. It really does look like the middle class is just getting squeezed out of home ownership. So what do you guys think? Comment down below. I'd love to have a discussion. I really hope I'm wrong. I hope in a year from now we look at this video and be like, dang, she was wrong. Remember, I'm not an expert. I'm just speculating here. But I hope that you enjoyed either way, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.